Okay, good evening. Good evening. I know that time doesn't matter. Time does not matter now, does it?
Good
All right.
evening.
It's a little hot, it's a little cold. We're dealing with it. Listen here, okay? I just wanted to, yes, have another podcast episode. We've been back from Peru for like about a month.
Got back. Yep.
Yep, about a month now.
Mhm.
Getting back, settled in a little bit more, a little bit,
A little thrown off still.
still don't know how, in what ways.
I don't know, but just with getting our schedule routine back in the mix, trying to figure out our working out, and then summer schedule is different. We left right when school kind of routine ended, and we came back and it was like summer routine,
Right.
and so there was no
Yeah,
like school, vacation, summer.
yeah.
So the transitions.
Yeah. So a lot is going on. One of the things is what's that called? The summer camps, and then the summer swim
Summer
class.
swim lessons
Mm-hmm.
and work. My job. I feel like my job. I started a new
Right.
position in April, and then we go on the trip in June, and then I was still training, and then my full load came back on right when the summer schedule started, and so it's trying to navigate being on call and doing some things I hadn't done before, plus doing things I hadn't done before, like working out, picking him up from camp, and taking him to swim lessons, and then getting home at 8 o'clock at night.
Right. And
No big deal.
The hard part, one of the hard parts about it was having to pick him up from a new location and continue the routine as if it's not a new location. So that means sometimes forgetting the new location.
Oh
It's
my gosh, that happened. Yeah, I'm
Right.
driving, nope, he's not there this week.
Right.
Turn around, drive somewhere else. So yeah.
Right.
That has been challenging on the brain.
That's true.
Yeah.
And for me, work has been pretty regular. Getting back to it was not so difficult or complicated in terms of just the routine of going to and coming from work, but just dealing with the new schedule again once I get home. Usually they're home when I get home, or we're all kind of arriving around the same time. And this time I arrive home and no one's here for another hour and a half. And so that awakens some different issues, but it also gives me a little bit more time to myself. Been trying my best this week I've been putting some new effort in getting back to working out, which actually it's worked a little bit, but I wanted to work better. I have high standards with working out. I don't give myself much credit for doing little things. It's no, if you didn't go hard, you didn't go hard consistently, then I don't know what you call that. And so I have to work with myself as I get back into the routine of working out, which actually was interrupted before the trip to Peru. Interrupted because this cat, right? But it was also interrupted because of work that I was having on Saturdays. I took a part-time job on the Saturdays. I was not hiking. That means we weren't hiking on Saturdays. That meant that when she changed positions, she was more available on Saturdays and Sundays. So we were hanging out more on the weekends. And so, it's a few different things that have kind of thrown me off, apart from other mental things that have transpired as a result of unforeseen events, right? There was a car accident, some health complications, and how that just throws you off both mentally and therefore physically, because you're out of a routine, things aren't okay. We only had one car between the two of us. It was really complicated for a few months, and so getting back to the schedule is going to be important, but it has been and will continue to be, a struggle. Bear with us as we deal with this cat who is so hyper right now, and close. Usually she could be hyper upstairs, hyper downstairs, playing with the other cat, but she's hyper 5 feet away from us.
Right.
It's going down right now.
Right. It's entertaining.
Right.
But yeah, so one of the things
You guys gotta love.
I wish that we could also record what she's doing right now.
Right.
But one of the things that came up for us, kind of because we haven't had anything between us that has been conflict. I think the things like Jermaine mentioned, there was like the car accident, and then dealing with having one car, and the insurance, and getting the car repaired, and then the health stuff. But that was like kind of individually what we were dealing with, and there was no like conflict between each other. Like we weren't like mad at each other, arguing, anything like that. So we were able to kind of navigate that pretty smoothly as far as our relationship to each other goes. Kind of communicate about how we're feeling about what's going on. And that's kind of been how this past year, since January, I guess, like how
It's just been 6 months.
6 months since January, I said.
I would even say since November, so I would even give it a couple more months, maybe like 7 or 8 months.
I was just gonna say for this year, how that's been, and then just kind of getting used to that in a way. Like we had our scheduled communication time that we were using regularly because it was like necessary. Like we each had our therapy on Tuesdays, and then we would have our scheduled communication time, which is around like 7:30 every night. And so as we became more stable, it was like, okay, we can use communication time to like, we weren't watching any shows back then. It was like we were not watching anything because it was like we were working on ourselves and our relationship. And then we get into this like, we're like smooth sailing, and it's like, maybe we can watch some shows at night. And I was like, yeah. So we've caught up on a lot of shows, and that's kind of what that time has turned into. And
talking about less pressing things,
right?
Like how work was, how some things that came up at work, some things that came up for me at work, things I just were thinking about for the weekend, plans. So it was communication, but it was communication in a peaceful, just regular stuff communication.
Yeah,
and
stuff.
And it gets you out of the routine of having to discuss things that you don't want to talk about, hard to talk about, things that you hope they're not worried about, thinking about, concerned about. And so that's also what was happening.
Yeah, so we were talking, but yeah, like he said, just kind of, and there were some things, but like he mentioned, it was more about what happened throughout the day, how we're feeling about those things. And I would say, this past week, it really became clear how much we need to make time to talk about how we're feeling on a deeper level about things, because they add up, right? It's like, okay, this thing right here is not that big of a deal, and we're not arguing about it, but it's still kind of there, and we did talk about it, but then, this thing and this little thing, and then it's like, well, now I'm having a lot of feelings about, maybe there's a theme happening, like I'm not feeling appreciated, or, I'm not really feeling like you're understanding or seeing what I'm going through. And so that's kind of what came to a head this week. And I would say like there was some, I could definitely feel myself getting some of those feelings, like older feelings back, like Jermaine brought up, because my therapist left the country, and so like I transitioned out of therapy, and it was a good timing wise. It made sense. It wasn't abrupt or like a bad time. So I was like, okay, I think I'm in a good space. I have the tools that I need and resources. I feel like I can figure this out without therapy. And then similarly for Jermaine, he transitioned out. So we're both out of therapy since probably like the spring. No, mine was January actually.
Yeah,
mine was
January.
December. Yeah, January. So for the past 6 months, 7 months. And he brought up this week, after kind of talking and going, there are feelings, there are things that like we have to like make sure we're communicating and staying on top of this. And he brought up therapy again. And I know that I felt like...
I know that you felt.
a little defensive. I'm like, I thought we were okay. And so now, this is what old me does. It's like, now we're not okay. Like, oh, so you want to break up? Like, guess we're getting a divorce. And like, just all of this like fear, right? And it's like, what am I scared about? Like,
right.
Why am I having this like, such this like emotional, like visceral reaction just to him being like, maybe it'd be a good idea if I started therapy again, like just to like start to like have a place to talk about these things. And why it's important to keep doing the work. And I will say, and it did go differently, right? Like I was annoyed, and he knew I was irritated and feeling feelings. But we come back and we talk about it, and there wasn't like an argument. There was more like we were able to check in about it. And I know I feel I was able to share more in a more honest way how I was feeling. Whereas before in the past, if he's like, well, what are you feeling? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just like annoyed, or I'm just like, I'm feeling irritated and like, I can't trust you or something like that. Like it's you,
Right.
I just feel like if you would have, done this, then it, we wouldn't be doing this right now. But, part of something that I was able to acknowledge was like, we were able to have the conversation. It was late at night, which is not something we do. We don't,
Right.
we always, a learning takeaway from past arguments was don't start these conversations late at night. You're tired. Your capacity to like manage your emotions is like not there.
Right.
Late
And it's
at
going
night.
to impact how
you
you
sleep.
sleep, whether or not you sleep,
Yeah.
how long you sleep, how peaceful you sleep.
Right.
And what I think this is a good time to bring up is the scheduling part again. Not scheduling, but the schedule part, which brings up how we have 24 hours in a day, right? And we put a bunch of things on our schedules. And sometimes we put things on our schedules and we're not thinking that it's going to matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, hey, like, like we said, there's a swim class now. The swim class ends around 7:30. We'll get home around 8. Things will be fine. Everything's going to be okay. But the reality is that is another 30 minutes, another hour where you all aren't together. And that can mean that you aren't communicating, you aren't talking. But what it definitely means is if there's a pressing issue, you're not going to deal with it until 8 o'clock at night.
Right.
Now, 8 o'clock might not be the time you deal with it. Actually, when you get home from an activity, whether it's dropping someone off, whether it's swimming, whether it's taking another class, whatever it may be, now you might actually talk about it at 9 because you needed to get undressed, take the shower, clean up, right? So these are all things that are pulling us away from home, things that we need to do at home, and then we're having to like stuff it in this like smaller and smaller space. And so what that did mean for us was that it really was never now. there's not like a good time to talk about things because it's going to have to be closer and closer to bed
Yeah.
because that's when everybody's actually home to talk, and it's not a good idea to have talks that are difficult to have while you're at work.
Right.
So that's a lesson that we learned. Been applying that. So if I have a pressing issue as a pressing issue, let's try to talk about it at work via text because it's probably not going to get solved. Probably going to get worse. So let's talk about it at night when we're present. We can see each other. We can hear inflections, right? Hear the voice, hear the tone, all that stuff. And what it has meant was that this week it was really never a great time to talk.
Yeah.
And we just had to say, listen, we're gonna have to talk right before bed. It's not a best idea, but man, we gotta talk, man. We just aren't. We're talking, but on what level are we communicating? That's the question that really came up this week.
Yeah, and I feel like we did a good job, and I think we both probably, like with everything he just said and what we've talked about in previous episodes, I think we both knew that it was important to talk at that time, and it's not ideal, and so let's do this carefully. I know I was thinking that. I was thinking it's late, and let me be careful with and feel what I'm feeling and then respond, and take my time, to respond and like listen to what he's saying, how I'm feeling, saying what I'm going to say, being very intentional with how we were communicating at that time. I'm not sure if he, we didn't talk about that afterwards, but I do know that the conversation went well. Seems like a weird thing to say, because we talked about hard stuff, but or like real things that we're feeling and dealing with currently. But yeah, I do feel like we were both able to share a lot about what we've been going through internally, different things that are on our hearts, and share it in a way where we weren't making the other person feel bad about themselves or like they were responsible for how we're feeling. It was just like a real honest moment, and so I feel like that was a pretty good indicator of like kind of where we're at and all the work we've done.
Right.
To have to do that, we avoid it if we're able to, but it's good to know that like if necessary, because it is going to be necessary at times to talk at not the best moments, that we're able to do that in a way that's not damaging.
Right.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about what people say. When people get divorced, they break up, relationship doesn't work out. I hear a lot of people say things like, we grew apart, you know what I mean? And one of the things I used to think, or was wondering, what does that mean? I was thinking like, it probably means that one person was doing one thing and the other person was doing something similar or not doing that same thing. They weren't doing it at the same time, and they weren't growing at the same time. That's what my mind, because they say we grew apart. But the reality is not everybody's always growing, right? So let's just be honest about that. Everybody's not growing all the time. Some people are changing though. And with that being said, what it made me think about is how this week could have been, was an example of the way that people can grow apart, in the sense of the schedules, their individual lives slowly separate in such a way, in such a way as to slowly make it where you're not talking, but you're not talking in a deep way like you used to. You're not on the same page about certain things because you've honestly relaxed about certain things. You said, hey, I don't mind if they're gone a little bit. We're not really talking, we're not hanging out. I still love them. We're still cool. We're not arguing, we're not having any issues. But slowly but surely, because you're not intentionally having difficult conversations, then there's a part where I feel like, rather than coming back together, you kind of just slowly go in two different directions. And so now it's harder to have enough difficult conversations to get back to the same page. Whereas if you try to have deep conversations regularly, communicate on deeper levels regularly, and really check in. You know, I think that's a big word that's coming to me right now.
Yeah.
Checking in with each other. How are you doing? How are you doing about these different areas? How are you feeling about things enough to where you say, man, like I feel connected to that person. We can actually talk, do pick up, do drop off, work, pay bills, all that stuff, and honestly not feel connected because we're not really intentionally connecting with what the other person is really going through, feeling, thinking, experiencing. We're just kind of I want to say roommates. I feel like that's overused, but you know, we're just kind of partners, you know, or you know, folks at work, right? You don't necessarily have deep relationships with people at work, but you do work together. You accomplish goals together. We can do that without really communicating, and we say, well, let's make sure that we are communicating, even if we got to cut off Netflix, cut off Hulu, cut off, you know.
Or not go to something.
Because there's so many things to go to.
Yeah.
So much fun to be had.
Right. And so that was something this week that came up. There was an event. There were probably a couple things that could have happened, a few things that could have happened on Friday. And, you know, one of the things was like an opportunity for Jermaine, and I want to be supportive. So I'm always like, you know, yeah, you can do it. I could drive out there, we could do this whole thing, and I could help you do this. And then he's just kind of like, you know, we should, as much as I want to like figure it out and try to do that, what's important is like probably just staying home and doing something just like chill, because it is true, like we can just be go and doing things we want to do, right? It's like we're excited about these things, but it's not allowing us kind of that downtime with each other. And yeah, I will say like a lot of the feelings, some of the feelings were about feeling probably more distant throughout the week. You know, like he was saying, you know, how a schedule can like impact how you're connecting. Getting home at 8 versus getting home at 6. It's like 2 hours of time where we're normally able to do a check-in and then talk a little bit more later on, but you know, not seeing your person for, you know, 2 less hours of the day, we're already like not seeing them for 12 hours of the day.
Already.
That makes a big difference in it. One of the things that I was most likely reflecting right now was like distance, you know, self-imposed distance. I did it. He didn't agree to this swim schedule. I was like, I'm signing him up, and I'm gonna be the one responsible for like picking him up and taking him and driving all over the East Bay, Monday through Thursday.
Which is totally fair that she takes that responsibility. Right. At the end of the day, now we're both kind of impacted by that.
And I think one of the things you can tell yourself is like, well, if I'm taking something on, it's not going to impact him. And so I don't maybe have to include him in a lot of the conversations about it. I think that's something that came up, like still being sure to like, let's be on the same page, because I can take things on, he can take things on, and just kind of be like, it's not on her, like I'm gonna do it, but it's all on us. It's all gonna affect both of us.
Yeah.
So kind of trying to be more mindful about the check-ins, keeping each other in the loop with plans, even if we think the other person is not really going to be affected by it. It's always safer
just to communicate, talk about
communicate it and not make those assumptions.
One of the examples that came to mind is like why you don't, well, not why you don't, because some people do, right? But why it's not the same thing to go on a first date with somebody and you guys go watch a movie together. It's cool to go watch a movie together, and I've done it.
I think we've all done it.
And I've done it. You know, and you'll have, let's say you have a good time at the movie, but you just spent 2 hours, 1.5 hours to 2.5 hours, depending on the occasion, not connecting with the person you were just you did this whole thing to connect with. So you guys were together in the same space. You guys were next to each other. Hey, right? You guys were eating together, right? Watching a movie together, but there was no real relating that was happening. And in some way, the date kind of didn't really start until after the movie, where you get to share like what came up for you. Did you like the part that, and sometimes that can be a whole conversation depending on how great the movie is and how deep of an experience it can be, and you guys can really get to know each other because of that experience. But if you part at the end of that movie, then you really didn't spend much time together. And so what I feel like is it was like that this week, where I felt like we were coming home together. We were sleeping in the same bed. We're talking. We're watching the same shows, kind of, because she wants to watch something I don't really want to watch right now. And last week I wanted to watch something she didn't really want to watch. And so we're in the same bed. We're cuddled or whatever, but we're not really talking, not really connecting. And that is what showed up this week. Is like, y'all gonna have to just, unzip whatever you're at right now and just go deeper today, because at this rate you're just going to ignore issues, which honestly isn't something that you do intentionally, as much as just like with working out and not working out, when you get into a place of doing things that aren't that uncomfortable, doing things that are uncomfortable feel that much harder, even though you can do it. You've done it before. You've done the push-ups, you've done the mountain climbs, you've done the lunges before, but since you haven't done it in this many days or this many weeks, when it's time to do it again, you don't do it as readily. And so it's important to do it so regular that it's not difficult to go on that hike that's 6 miles again, because we've been doing it our bodies are used to it. Same thing with communication. Our minds, our hearts are used to it. It's not difficult to go, we got to talk about something hard. It's like we do it all the time. Yeah. We got out of that routine, and so now we're struggling to get back to having some of those conversations.
Right. So just, having to reprioritize things, and, it's not new information. And I think that is what is going to make it easier this time. I don't know if easier is the right word, but we know how to do it. We know what we've done in the past to make time and space for that, and why it's important, and why it's so crucial to do. And so we just, like the analogy with working out, you and analogies. He's like, so there's an airplane.
Right.
And the wings. You're one wing, I'm the other wing.
If the propeller.
I'm listening to this. But yeah, just like with working out, you know what you need to do.
You know what you need to do.
You just have to make the plan and get back to it. And it's, muscle memory is helpful. Your body knows how to do it. We know how to start the conversations, have the conversations now at least. Whereas before, we had to learn how to even have the conversations. It's the whole thing.
Right.
Don't want to go back to that.
Right.
So
exactly. Let's just keep on working it out, so it's not so hard. Yeah. But I do want to commend you on how that conversation wasn't too hard, because there's defensiveness, there's cute cats, right? There's feelings that arise when we feel challenged, we get aggravated, and we just start throwing stuff. And I don't mean physically, right? But some people do, right? But start throwing things verbally just to because we're upset and we're not intentionally having a conversation. So I brought up the therapy stuff, and I feel like the energy changed. I'm like, oh gosh, okay, look, we'll deal with it later. I know it's early in the morning. We'll talk about it another time. Like I said, we don't have another time. We don't have much time to talk about stuff, right? So now it's like, well, I just had to bring it up because we're here, we're together, we're supposed to talk. Nope, not a good time to talk about it. Anyways, we'll talk about it another time. But the reality is, I knew that there was that friction that was being felt, and I could have engaged in and said, we can argue about stuff and let's do this right now. It's 7 o'clock. It's never too early for a fight, right? But I'm like, no, let's deal with it later. We'll be fine. And we'll talk about these feelings. We'll talk about where it came from, what it's about, and what's going on with you. And kind of lost where I was going with it. But yeah, communication gets really, once we're out of that routine.
You were commending me.
Yes, you could have just been out of pocket and stayed out of pocket, but you didn't. You felt feelings, but you didn't try to attack me. You didn't try to attack my character. You didn't try to, say, well, what about you?
It is true.
You guys know that one.
and I would get, and it's not good at it, but there were ways in which I would slide things in that were definitely like insults, or like he said, like an attack of character, which was like, well, I'm not raising my voice or yelling, but just a little pinch in the back of the arm.
You scared? What? You don't? Oh, that don't feel good?
And it didn't happen. So
it didn't happen.
And what I will say too is, I think giving me time, and that was something also, right? Like, so thank you for commending me, and recognizing that, because I recognized it too myself. But also, he could have shut down or been triggered because of our past conversations and how things can usually go, where he could go, well, I brought up the therapy and you kind of got a little defensive, and now I'm triggered. Like, now I'm like, oh crap, right? But he still moved forward with communicating with me and trusting me, giving me an opportunity, right? And trusting me to go, hey, we're gonna have this conversation and still move forward, because either one of us could shut down, right? And so I think it was a good challenge, because it did kind of show what we're capable of doing with each other as far as communication and conflict resolution. Because honestly, that was the theme of 2018, 2019, 2020 was like, how do we do conflict?
Especially
We're not
2021.
Yeah, we're not doing it well. The pandemic was like, here's all the conflict. And we were like, yeah, battling that. So, to be presented with conflict now, and not major conflict, but just like, a situation, and to be able to weather it relatively, well, given the circumstances.
Yeah.
Yes, we should definitely celebrate and acknowledge the small things, because that took a lot of work. So
right.
I think if we just we're like, well, yeah, that's what you were supposed to do.
Right. Come on. And so, yeah, that's real.
Now she wants to be tired. Sorry.
Right. We're grateful. One of the things that came up for me is being involved, right? Being involved. So one of the things about being independent and wanting each other to be free to make decisions, trusting one another. You do what you do. Listen, I'm not about to be, some people like to say policing, but monitoring everything that you do and asking all these questions all the time, like, where did you go? What did you do? What is the plan? You didn't tell me. Oh, I thought that we were da-da-da. There's a part where I want to let go, and I show that she wants to let go too, and say, listen, like, do what you got to do. Like, I trust you not to make terrible decisions that are just going to ruin everything for us, because we didn't make that decision together. However, that gets to a place where the distance starts saying, I don't feel involved in your life though. And the more that you do that, the less that I feel involved. And that leads to something else. But for a brief second, that creates some of the distance that we were feeling, and it starts creating some bitterness, some resentment that simply says, you don't need me to do certain things. And so let's be fair. I don't need you to do certain things. So I'm going to make certain decisions.
It's called pettiness.
right? But I'm gonna make certain decisions without your consent, without you knowing, right? Without you even knowing about it. And again, sometimes and that came up in our conversation, sometimes that's not being petty. Sometimes you just weren't there when the decision had to be made, and so I had to make a decision and you didn't know it. But when I got home, I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about the other stuff. And so weeks pass, days pass, hours pass, whatever.
It doesn't feel like, a big decision, but then when you make 5 of them,
it adds up.
It adds up. So you made 5 smaller decisions.
And now it's like, bro, I don't know what you're doing. What is the other decisions you've been making that I don't know mattered?
Right. We're both like, now. So what's in your package? We're both, what's in your package?
Wait, hold on. Like, how many boxes are going to show up?
Well, you had some boxes, so I got some boxes, okay?
We both got boxes. Why you open it downstairs? Right. Open it right here. Open it right here at the table. Put it on the table. God dang it. Hold on. You just buying every mother. You know what I'm talking about.
I'm like, if I put it together before he gets home, maybe he won't notice that it's just part of the, part of the decor.
Y'all know how many things we got for these dang cats.
They're nice, though.
That are here. I don't care how nice they are. The truth of the matter is these weren't joint decisions, okay? And again, this is, it gets big because I think our culture says embrace individuality, embrace independence, one another's independence, so much so to where people are living completely separate lives in the same rooms, under the same roofs, and end up having to go, you know what, I don't feel connected to them no more. And there's a part where we can say, you know what, yeah, because they're not doing this and we didn't do that enough and all that stuff. But there's another part where we can say we were slowly contributing to the lack of connection because we weren't intentionally involving one another in each other's lives. And that felt weird because we are encouraging independence. We're encouraging independence, and somehow we are expecting each other to always feel connected somehow, but we're completely separate. So we have to intentionally figure out how we're going to be independent and involved. Like, there has to be this intentional involving if we're going to be independent, because otherwise it is destined to fall apart because we are so dang independent here in the United States of America.
Yeah, it's true. It's got to be a joint effort, and it's got to be,
working together on purpose.
Together intentionally
on purpose.
So yeah, I think we said this was going to be a short one.
I got more, but we could, it is 9. It is 9. It is 9. I got more.
But yeah, we'll do another one sooner than the time between the last.
Y'all hear that?
One.
Y'all hear that?
It's me saying it.
It's her saying it. So you okay? Okay. So next week, we got to get back to it.
We'll be back with more.
Yes.
Because there's always more.
Yeah, so I would say, in closing, communicate, involve each other, even if it's not deep, even if it's, what you about to buy on Amazon, what you about to get on Instacart, but just involve each other. Yeah. Because, like we said, it adds up.
It is.
All right, so who's going to get up and turn off the camera?
Not me.
Be like, all right, so Storm, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw you at the phone.
And she was going crazy. Flipping, hardcoring all over the place. And now she's just like wiped out.
Wiped out, chilling.
So cute.
Taking all the naps. Oh, you just want to kiss them and hold them and then they scratch you or something. But she hasn't been really scratchy.
No, I clipped her nails.
Yeah.
We gotta turn this off.
We gotta turn this off. All right. Just don't talk about the fact that we're not really matching right now.
I know. We're covering our lower halves.